Well, hi everybody. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome to AfriCent with BT. I am so excited to it is our first live YouTube show. My neighbor is fixing their roof, so bear with me. You're going to be hearing some background noise and all that. We have an amazing guest coming on today, Engineer Basudde Kajubi William, a mentor, a father, a husband, a friend, a brother, a son. I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm so excited. But while he comes on, I know that this month, October, one of the things I've really been kind of talking to every young person who cares to listen is about FAFSA. So please, if you haven't gone to the FAFSA website and filled in your application, please do so. Okay. Yes. There we go. Hi, Basudde, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? No? No
Yes,
sound.
I can hear you.
Oh,
I
okay, good
was
sound.
having issues. I had set up outside and I was having a ton of issues, so I just decided to just come inside. I'm
Okay.
so excited to have you. Before you came on, I was telling our viewers about FAFSA because it's October 1st. FAFSA opened up for them to apply for financial aid, for grants,
Yeah.
all that nice stuff.
Yeah.
But now that you're here, we
Mm-hmm.
are going to just dive right into. Thank you so much. Welcome to AfriCent with BT.
Mm-hmm.
We are excited, as you know, and everybody who is joining us for a second time or a third time, we are all about the diaspora and all the sentiments that come with living in a diaspora.
Sure.
So, I'm just going to dive right in and ask you,
Okay.
who are you? What's your name? What do you do? And all those. Are you Ugandan? Are you African? Because Africa is not a country, right?
Right,
So
right.
you tell us, who are you? Who is Basudde Kajubi William? I like
All
your
right.
Ugandan names because they carry
Yeah.
so much power.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much. So Basudde William Sebutemba Kajubi, that's my full name. I'll give you my whole name.
Whoa, September.
Yeah,
I didn't know that one. That's a new one for me. I've
Sebutemba.
learned that
Yeah, it's a
today.
very strange it's a clan name. So it's in
It's a
Senene
fun name.
clan. It's a clan name given to me
Nice.
from one of my grandfather's cousins. So yeah, so
Nice.
it's rare. I have never met anybody else. It's just me and him with that name. So it's
Yeah,
strange, but
actually think
it's
about it.
there.
Yeah, okay.
It's
I haven't,
there.
now that I think about it, I'm like, I do not know anybody. So you're the first, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I'm born and raised in Brockton,
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts, which is
Mm-hmm.
here in the United States in the Boston area.
Yes.
Yes, definitely Ugandan. Both my parents are Ugandan. My father and mother, who met here, they met when they came here
Oh, wow.
in the 70s. So both of them came in the 70s.
Oh, my
They've
goodness.
been here a while. So I
Oh,
mean, both my parents
wow.
have lived longer in this country than they did in Uganda. So they've
Yeah.
been here a while.
This is home for them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They've been here a while. They're both retired, so good. Yeah, so I'm recently married. I have a wife. Her name is
Wow.
Rose.
Hi,
So
Rose.
yeah, yeah. We got married in 2019, so about 2 years.
Yeah.
I have a baby boy. He's eight months old now in
Oh,
Kwanzi.
my
His name is in Kwanzi
God.
Senteza Kajubi.
Oh, my
So he's
goodness.
there. Yeah, so new challenges of fatherhood as well.
Yeah.
I am a client service manager in the investment management industry for
Mm-hmm.
finance.
Mm-hmm.
I've been with my current firm, Bank of New York Mellon, I've been there about 8 years now. Yeah, 8 years. Before that, I
Mm.
was in engineering. I actually have an engineering degree, computer engineering, out of
I
UMass
know that's the
Amherst.
exciting
It's
part.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's been quite a journey, let me tell you.
It's
So
been a journey. It's
it
funny that you
has.
said that. When you and I were speaking before this live show, we were talking about like your journey as like your education journey versus your career journey, and then the
Sure.
ability to evolve. So
Yeah.
listening to you, you're an engineer by trade, but then right
Hmm.
now your career has led you, in a
Into
different
finance.
setting. Mm-hmm, into
Yeah,
finance. Yeah.
and I can explain where they kind of link, to be honest. I started out in engineering. I knew I liked math. I didn't really know what I wanted to
Yes.
do in undergrad, so I was steered. I had uncles who did engineering. I was
Mm-hmm.
steered towards that, and I liked it. I won't lie. There's certain aspects I really liked of it, but as I
Yes.
started to work, I knew. It was a growing interest in finance, and I wanted to make my way into the investment management world.
Yeah.
And to be honest, there's a lot of things within engineering that are transferable into
Mm.
finance. Some of the math concepts, some of it
Nice.
is very transferable, to be honest.
Mm,
So
mm.
I still consider myself an engineer at heart, honestly.
Yeah.
Even though I work in finance and investment management, I think like an engineer. I try to solve problems like an engineer. So
Yeah.
it's all applicable and it's all been relevant. So,
It's
and
it's
I
it.
think of my journey as just something that's built on. It
Yes.
just builds along the way, and that's been part of it for sure.
So your first job, did you like your first job or your first internship, was it in engineering or was it in finance?
Yeah. So my first internship. So in college, I did an internship at a company called BAE Systems.
Mm-hmm.
I was working, actually. The place I worked was in Lexington, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did is they designed like they designed the sites, like weapon sites. They're heavy into the
Mm-hmm.
defense and contracting industry.
Nice.
So they designed weapon sites. So I worked with cameras, and I was
Mm.
designing like semiconductor chips that would go in cameras
Nice.
for weapon sites. That's what I was doing for my first internship, and
Mm.
it was an interesting experience. It was great. And then my first job out of school, I think I did that a couple of summers. My first job out of school was
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Ohio. So right out of
Oh my
school, I was
goodness.
living in Massachusetts. I moved to Ohio, and I was working on an Air Force base,
Oh
in an
my
Air Force research
goodness.
lab. Yeah, it was crazy.
I mean,
Um,
it's interesting. It's like engineering and then
mhm.
research. You don't even like when people think of engineering. It's funny. I don't even know Basudde. If Jennifer, we share a friend, Jennifer
Okay,
Iga.
of course.
I
Yeah.
know you are one of her mentors, and she
Oh
said
yeah, yeah.
before
Hmm.
I went into engineering, I sat down and I talked to Basude, and he
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of like steered me in which direction I needed to go.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm listening
yeah.
to
We
you and
went to
I'm
school
thinking,
together.
imagine that, right? Like
Yeah,
peer counselor, right? Because I'm
yeah.
thinking every time we think of engineering, we think about cars or I mean, my father-in-law is an aero engineer, and my husband Jack, he's an automotive engineer who has moved into
Yeah,
nursing, right? So,
right.
but now you're talking about computer and IT and finance, like that's all
Hmm.
engineering, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. It covers the spectrum. To be honest, you can be like, there's computer engineering, which you can get into software and programming.
Mm-hmm.
There's electrical engineering, which is more like on the hardware side, like designing devices, and it gets into the
Mm-hmm.
electrical side of it. But then
Yeah.
there's also chemical engineer, which is kind of closer to chemistry, and now you're dealing
Oh,
with the molecules. There's biological engineering. There's all kinds of different engineering.
all
There's
kinds.
yeah, no, it runs the gambit really. There's civil engineering, which is more like building and buildings
Which is what
and
most of
things
our
like that.
African parents know.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
sure. There's all different kinds of engineering for sure. Mechanical engineering, too.
Mm-hmm.
That's in there. That you might be dealing a little bit more with supply chain dynamics. It's all there. Honestly,
It's
it
all
runs the
there.
gambit.
It's
Um,
so funny you say. So one of the things you mentioned was I loved math. That was one thing. I was steered into engineering because some of my uncles were engineers, right?
yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I realized is that most young people I've met, most Ugandans, because I've mainly worked with Ugandan youth,
Mm-hmm.
they they do courses because their parents say so. And their
Yeah.
parents didn't even do the research. It's because their friend at work said that this is a good course, right?
Yeah.
And most kids end up we had something in Gaza, our final year of high school. Rose, we went to school with Rose in Gaza,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's so
Yep. She
exciting.
was there.
So I know when I found out about you guys, I was so excited. I'm like, oh, this is good stuff. But in Gayaza, your final year of high school, there's a very big chunk of mentorship. We have old
Hmm.
girls coming in with their boyfriends, with their husbands, who are doing different professionals, and they tell us what they're doing. They kind of open up our minds. Like, I was in this dormitory. I went to school here. I sat here, and this is what I'm doing. I work for this company. This is exactly what I'm doing. That part of mentorship at the end of your high school, right
Hmm.
before you go into your what would be an associate here, that 2 years
Hmm.
of A levels. I
Yeah.
always feel like most young people finish high school. First of all, the fact that you study half day, 8 to 2 p.m., and then
Yeah.
the rest of the day you do whatever you want, and
Yeah.
then you jump into, and most people would go to public school, so that's paid for. Your parents don't pay for that unless they choose to
Right.
put you in private school, right?
Correct. Yep.
And then suddenly you are thrown into college where you're required to do more, where you have to pay for what you're going to, and yet you have no idea
Yeah.
what you're going to go for. So tell
Yeah.
me more about your parents, because now we are backtracking, right? Because part
Yeah.
of what I want to hear is your parents, and education wise, did they prepare you? Did you visit some colleges? Did they put aside a fund? Did they insist that you had to be a scientist? Because some of our parents would insist. My parents were very liberal. Do what you want, we'll pay for it, which
Yeah.
is not good,
Yeah.
right? We need guidance. But
Hmm.
then we had teachers. So we had teachers, and we had like old girls who kind of had done well, some who had gone before us and were coming back. So
Yeah.
here, let's talk about that whole component. Like, you're born to African parents who have been raised African, right?
Yep.
How was that, first of all? Because you're first generation.
Yeah. I
Your
am.
first
I'm first
generation, how
generation.
was that in relation to,
Mm.
like discipline, education, and all that? Food.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was kind of natural. I guess I didn't really know any other way. So I mean, it was interesting. So obviously, there's a large Ugandan community here in Boston now. It wasn't as large when I was growing up. A lot of
Yes.
Ugandans have come along the way. So I mean, it's
Mhm.
really a burgeoning community. But we had families, and we were all very close with these families. Honestly, my parents had a lot of friends. My
Yeah.
father, and to say that, while yes, I was raised here, my parents honestly came from Uganda. They were born in Uganda, but I'm actually the third generation who's gone to schools in this country. My grandfather attended
Oh,
college here in America. So
yes, a
I
big
mean,
educator. Yes.
we've had, there's a lot of, and my grandfather's very steeped in education, so there's a lot
Yes.
of history there. There's a lot of knowledge to be passed, at least from that standpoint. And while
Yes.
my parents didn't, I think where it was kind of new, obviously they didn't attend primary or school growing up, but my parents were
Mm-hmm.
always pretty strict in regards to like grades. We had to be
Mm-hmm.
doing well. If there wasn't, they were going to ask us about it. And
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just my parents, it was obviously my extended family too. I have a large
Yes.
extended family, and if you weren't doing well in school, people were going to be talking. It was very much that culture. You had to, it was a lot of competition, but there's also a lot of encouragement. Honestly, it was all,
Accountability,
yeah, accountability,
encouragement.
accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Hold you accountable for that.
Hold you
As far as,
accountable. Mm-hmm.
yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, we had to. I mean, if there were a problem at school or the grades weren't there, that had to be our priority.
Do
So
you feel like
obviously,
do you feel
yeah.
like
Go ahead.
expectations, like do you feel like the fact that you were expected, like you're that, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Basudde is a grandfather of one of the biggest educators in Uganda, Mwami
Hmm.
Kajubi, the late. And I tell you, so do you feel like that was an expectation, like this is the
Yeah,
way we do things as a family? It's my expectation that you go to college, like there's
yeah.
no dropping out.
Oh yeah, no, no. That
Mhm.
I think there was always that expectation. So I mean, I think I always knew. I
Mm,
could see obviously my parents had gone to college. My
yeah,
grandfather was steeped in education, so I always had eyes on going to college. I knew that.
yeah.
It was just kind of trying to figure out how I would navigate it. So I mean, in school I was always pretty studious. I mean, I was very good at math. I
Yeah,
was definitely on the nerdish side than any
yeah.
other side. I did a lot of sports. I loved playing sports, but
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say I was pretty. I mean, a lot of people knew me. I wasn't like the football star, typical popular person, but like a lot of people knew me and knew me as that smarter kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I was in all the advanced classes. I tried to
Nice.
push myself, and my parents were there for that too. But I
Mm.
didn't feel like it was like unhealthy or unproductive. They were. It was more like, we expect this of you, and they would be disappointed
Yes.
if we didn't meet the mark, and they would let us know that.
Yeah.
And there were definitely going to be consequences if we didn't, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we were expected to do well, and I think we wanted to do well. So I mean, I actually
Yeah.
liked going to school. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the
Nice.
experience. There were obviously days and things you didn't want to do, but
Yeah.
in general, I generally liked learning. I liked reading. I loved math. Math was my thing. Math and
Tell us
science.
more about the advanced classes because I
Mhm.
know that I do have. Because when I was in Massachusetts, I taught Sunday school, and we had so while I was there, one of the families migrated to America, and Massachusetts was their first days, and they had this amazing, very smart son, but he joined Newton, which is like a very affluent school system, and yet I
Yeah,
watched him
sure.
decline
Hmm.
until they moved to Chicago. And in Chicago, they started moving him to advanced classes.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
know that sometimes as a parent, you have to advocate for your child to, those
absolutely,
daily classes to kind of make sure that
absolutely.
they
Absolutely.
try.
I think the thing that's different here, and it's a lot harder, especially for Ugandans who come here to understand, you really have to be very involved in your child's education and what they're doing, and
Mm,
who they're hanging out with, their friend. You really have to know all these things because, like you said, I mean, especially being black, any type of black, it doesn't matter, and you're
mm,
going to school. Sometimes there will be educators and people who try to tell you that try to put limitations on you. Really, realistically, is what it is.
yes.
And you really have to advocate for your children. You know what I'm saying? You have to
Mm-hmm.
advocate for what classes they're in. Make sure they're being challenged. Make sure that they're
Mm-hmm.
getting their value in the school. That they're not being ignored at school. Which is This
Mm-hmm.
is why it's very important to develop a dialogue with your children and talk with them about things, because the
Yes.
only way you're going to start to find out about these things, they start to tell you and you have an open dialogue with them, because you'd be surprised at some of the things
Mm-hmm.
that happen at school, and you have to be an advocate for your child at school for sure.
For your
um
child. I know.
yeah.
But today, I remember a story your dad mentioned.
Mhm.
I love your dad. I have to host your
Mhm.
dad. I have to host your dad one of these
He'd be
days
happy to do
because
it, I'm sure
I
he
feel
would.
like he's watched our community evolve. Like I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
talk to him about like the whole Ugandan community evolving. He makes me think of my father-in-law because even him, he was like a groundbreaker because he did aero engineering and San Francisco was big. Like
Mm-hmm.
this was the place to be, even if his family was in
Yeah,
Maryland, my father-in-law.
sure.
San Francisco, so he had to break ground to come in and
Yeah,
just like know nobody and just break ground. And oh, we're all here because we are centered around him. So your dad is one of them. But I remember he was giving a talk and he said, "My son, he was writing E and three. Like every
yeah,
time there's an E, the way you are writing your threes and your
yeah,
E's, your
yeah,
brain played tricks." And these teachers were trying to kind of already kind of write you up. And it's like, no, no,
yeah,
no, no, no. That will be
yeah.
sorted. My son is going to proceed and do
Yeah, so what they
telling me,
thought, I mean, they were
that would
telling him
be
that basically that was dyslexia, and so they were going to put me in separate classes, for which my father only felt that would impede. He felt like, he understands the concept of, adding.
yes,
I think he says obviously I did my B's and and my threes. So they
yes,
said, does he know that B plus B is 6? If he does, then let's go. So I mean, they really, pushed, but he wasn't, doing it. So, and
yeah,
eventually it all got sorted out. I mean, I was
yeah,
fine.
uh-huh.
I haven't, I don't really think there were any other side effects. I really don't even really remember this, to be honest, what he's
Yeah.
saying.
I,
But I was
that
so
story
young at
stayed
the
with
time.
me because occasionally I write, like my brain, I write one word, I have all the letters in, but they're all mumbo jumbled. I'm like, okay,
Right.
this word is wrong, but I can't figure out how to reassemble the words, right? But
Yeah.
that doesn't make me any less intelligent. And I know
Yeah.
that makes me very conceited for saying it. But I think knowing that, like, if my child needs extra help or special ed, you know that resources where to go to. But
Yeah, yeah.
if my child just has one glitch and they're good to go, to kind of be attentive as a parent and
Hmm.
advocate. And
Yeah.
I think part of it is we don't even know these things exist. Like, you dump your child at elementary school and that's it. They're going to school. They're going to school.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's where it becomes tough. You got to know your child, but it's also, but I say wherever
Mhm.
possible, advocate for them for staying in the class with everyone else and fighting. I mean, until we know, I mean, obviously there are kids with special needs and they need special attention. That happens.
Yes.
And, and when
Yes.
it does,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be quick in trying to identify it because it might just be they need to learn a little bit different. Which I mean, to be honest, there
Yes.
are other resources, even within public schools, to do that. Might be a little bit of a harder
Yes.
road, but it might be
Yes.
better for them long term. So you have to identify
Mm-hmm.
that earlier on. But like you said, if it's something like if that's not necessary, then I would say wherever possible, keep them in the class with the rest of the students. If they're able to compete and they're able to,
Mm.
do all the things that the other children are able to do, then I'd say keep them there because kids develop over time. You don't know what your child is going to develop into, and you want to give them the most
Thank
tools
you.
possible to allow them to do
Okay.
that. So
Basudde, give me one split second. I'm a mom
yeah,
and I just had this little person jump, right? Just give
yeah,
me
yeah,
one
yeah,
second
yeah.
to
No,
mute that thing.
absolutely. Go right ahead.
I am so sorry about that.
No, no
So
worries.
Basudde, you
Mhm.
have a sister, right? And
Yep, I do.
tell me about that because I have a daughter and a son, and they're like night and day. Two,
Yeah.
like a replica of me, and he's a replica of his dad,
Hmm.
literally in personalities. Like, did you feel when she came along? How old? How many years apart between you two?
About 3 years apart. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I'm
not so
3 years
bad.
older than her. Yep.
So how did that? Do you think the decision? Because it's funny, because we here, but that now we started this whole thing of having children, and we're trying to make sure we educate ourselves so that we're ready, so
Hmm.
that we're ready for them, to educate them in a way, right? And by educating, not necessarily that you're going to school, but knowing the system and
Yeah.
knowing how to guide them, right? So do you feel like having a sibling, was it more competition,
No,
unhealthy,
I mean,
for
me and my sister have
attention?
always been. I don't really feel like that was going on between me and my sister. I think that does happen with some siblings, but I think it's up to the parents to kind of monitor
Mm.
that situation. I mean, of course, we had fights, we had things going on, but me and my sister have always been really, really close. Honestly, I'd say, she's like my best friend. Honestly, her and my
I
cousin. I
know,
have
I
a really
love
close
her.
cousin, but we grew up together, and we were all. I mean, everything that I've been through, she's been through. So
She has been
just came
too.
after me, and to see her flourish and do what she's doing is
Mm.
amazing. But no, we're really close. We think alike. We're a lot alike. I'd say in many and
And so it was a good thing that your parents had a friend for you, because
oh,
sometimes
absolutely.
it gets too overwhelming with one child that you just make a decision not to have a second one
Yeah,
because
it
you're
can
like,
happen.
"Ah, I can't do it. I can't do this."
Hmm. It can
Yeah,
happen.
but
I definitely think it's been an advantage to have a sister.
yeah.
I've always wondered what it would like to be, have more siblings, but to be
Mm,
honest, I was always happy with just me and my sister. To be honest, I thought
yeah,
we were really close growing up. I think my parents did a really good job of raising us,
I
but
think they
um,
did.
as we got older,
Mm,
I think you could see, when you're younger, obviously 3 years is actually quite a bit when you're younger. But once you
mhm,
grow up and, once we were both going to college,
mm,
and we went to the same college, we went to the same
mm,
high school, we went to the same elementary school, all the same schools. We had near experiences, and it's just interesting to see, her now. She's actually bought her first home now. She bought her first home, and
Nice.
she's actually doing, college. She's doing grad school at Harvard.
Oh my
So she's
God.
really flourishing. So you see, you start to look at her, and as her older brother, I'm obviously proud of that, and I'm happy to see that,
Yes.
to see that progression. But I mean, I just feel like our family is so incredibly close that
Yes.
there's always been that link there.
So, so I mean, from what you're saying, it's important that when people choose to migrate, to stay close to family,
Oh,
husband,
absolutely.
auntie, whatever, and just like nurture those relationships because the kids will need that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I advocate for family. I think family is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Stay in contact, and when things are happening, it's tough. But those blood ties, those strong ties,
Mm-hmm.
developing those and maintaining those over time
Maintaining them
will
over
reap
time. Yeah.
rewards. They will reap rewards because when you go
Mm-hmm.
out in this world, and especially here in America, you can
Yeah.
feel like you're alone at times if you're not careful.
Yes.
You can
Yes.
go out, you could get isolated. You could
Mm-hmm.
start to feel like, you're not seen at times. So you got to maintain, and
Mm-hmm.
if you have family who's in your corner, those are the people going to pick up a phone and call you and say, "What's going on? How you doing?"
Mm.
Or you're just going to have regular, casual conversations.
Mm.
Maintain those
It
relationships,
makes
and
a difference.
oh, it does. It makes a huge difference. I mean, even when I moved to
It
Ohio
makes
and
a
I was out
difference.
there, my
I
parents would come
know.
and visit me. Nachi would come and visit me. So, it was good. And, it
It
was
was
really good.
good. It was
Hmm.
good. So let me ask, so did you pay for your own education or did your parents pay for the education?
My
And
parents
if
paid for my undergrad education. They did. They paid
your
for
parents paid for your undergrad
yeah.
education
Hmm.
and
They
you
did.
chose to go to, did they have some rules? You have to go to a public school. You have to do,
No, but we made a decision. I actually got a scholarship. I got a scholarship. Actually, I entered a conversation with a family friend. I wrote some essay, applied for a scholarship, and I got a
Mhm.
couple scholarships that were applicable to UMass Amherst. So that actually
Okay.
influenced my decision a lot to go there. Obviously,
Mm. The
financially,
fact
I
that
ended
they
up
gave you
getting
a scholarship.
yeah, they gave me a decent amount of money there. So I was actually doing
Okay.
well to the point where I was basically just paying kind of room and board, honestly. As far as school, I was pretty much paid for. So, and anything
And
else,
the
my parents
scholarship,
kind of
was it
covered that.
based on sorry to interrupt you. So was
Yeah.
the scholarship based on sports or merit?
No, no, no. It was merit. It was academics, and then I applied for it, and then I had to write an essay, and
Mm-hmm.
explain, why I should get the money and what I would do, and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. So I always tell people, when you're going to apply to school, make sure you do that. Look for
Mm.
those scholarships. People are giving away money.
Yes.
You just got to
So
look
don't
for it.
give
It's not
money.
nobody's gonna come and say, "Hey, here's," but you got to go and look for it. You got to look around, say, "What are the opportunities?" Especially in your
Mm.
local communities. In your cities, towns. They're looking for people. And right now, especially with the state of things in this country, especially if you're
Yes.
black or
Yes.
African, or they're looking for people who are qualified and can go on and do good things because they want it.
Mm-hmm.
Diversity is a huge thing in the industry right now. So
Diversity. Mm-hmm.
they want people to excel so they can go on and create networks where other people are excelling as well.
Yes.
So
And to
I
speak to
say
that,
look for that
Basude,
money. Hmm.
and to speak to that, just that point of diversity, we have to have our voices at the table.
Yeah,
You can't have your voice at the table if you don't qualify and enter that space.
yeah,
Like right
absolutely.
now you're in management, Basude, like you represent a certain experience, right? Because
Yeah,
you are American,
yeah,
but because you come from a whole line of Africans, there's an experience that somebody else who is like, was born here like four generations down, they can't trace, where which part of Africa they came from. Their experience is different, right? And somebody else who is from India, their experience is different, who is from Australia, so we need your experience at the table.
yeah,
And the more I think about, like, now I have kids and we look for things to watch, and half the time I'm trying to find things that represent my values, and most
yeah,
times it's so hard to do. But because the people who are
yeah.
designing, who are coding, there's no one who has my values at the table,
It's
right?
true. Yeah, it's
So
true.
you're right. We need to go to school and be able
Yeah,
to represent all
it's a
these
very
values there.
important point. It's a very important
Mm.
point. I always tell people, take your career seriously. Look for, if you can, some leadership positions. Try to take on
Leadership
management if you can.
positions.
Management is not for everybody. I'll say,
Yeah.
I've taken it on and done it. There's
Yeah.
parts of it I really enjoy. There's parts of it I don't enjoy.
Yes.
So I've been in and out of being a manager. But I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's important to be seen as authority figure in your workplace, and more
Yes.
people need to take that plunge and do that if you can. If you can have the capacity to do it, because it changes how you're viewed in the workplace, And I always tell
Mm-hmm.
people this, there's so much to learn about career progression, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't learn that unless you do the mentorships or you put yourself in positions where you're leading other people, or
Yes.
and it's scary at times and you're going to mess up and make mistakes, but what you'll
Yes.
see is you're given a little bit more latitude and people will start to have a little bit more respect for you, and
Hmm.
it instills a little bit more confidence in you.
Yeah.
So which is important, which is I think that's what the workplace is about, the confidence factor.
The
Once you
confidence
have that,
factor. Mm.
you just continue to grow and learn and technically. I always tell people it's important to be technically excellent, uh,
Yes.
but I think it's important that we have representation in these companies,
So you're
for
speaking
sure.
about a couple of things. So it's important to be technically like if you're as I'm a nurse by trade, and I think one of the things that I feel so good about that I got my education in Uganda, and yet I don't feel less qualified for my
Yeah,
position. I feel like
schools in
it
Uganda are
was
very
one of
good.
the
They're
best
very good.
educations I received.
Yeah,
Yes, so in my space, like skills, when they say we have to do this, I know how to do it, and that is such a wonderful feeling. But
hmm,
then skill is one thing, but also personality, being confident, because
yeah,
we come from a culture where you let other people talk about you. Oh, this
hmm,
is Basudde Kajubi, who is da, 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 da. Yet here we have that 3 second elevator conversation. If you are in a CEO elevator with the CEO of a company, that you will be remembered. He will go back and like, who is that person who works in my company? Like you blow your own horn. It's just a culture. And I think that's
hmm,
something we need to instill in our children so that they are ready for the workspace, because it's vicious. He who speaks most, he who is best represented, they might not be as knowledgeable, as skilled as you, but because they are confident,
yeah.
then they become, they're content with you, and you want to have to grow. You don't want to stay in the same place in terms of career, right?
Yeah, no, no. Career progression is very important, and I think another part of that, which leads into this, is also networking, knowing how to network, approach people who aren't
Network.
necessarily like you, and figure out who you need to meet and have those conversations with. Because I think mentorship is important. I advocate for mentorship. I've had great mentors in my work, and they've been very, very helpful in my career progression. But
Mm,
the other thing, which is also a bit different, and I think changing for I'd say our generation, and it definitely will be different for the younger ones that is coming, is that you always kind of got to be looking for that next opportunity. Like honestly,
mhm,
like I
mhm.
mean, there was a time when coming up they tell you, you look at and you're jumping opportunities, and if you're doing that too much, that might be a red flag. But it's less so now. I think it's more
Mhm.
you've got to be looking to advocate for yourself, and that
Yes.
means creating leverage, and that means understanding what opportunities are out there in the workplace for you.
Yes. Mhm, mhm.
I mean, obviously we will have limitations the older we get because we have families, so we might be tied to a certain
Yes.
area, or if we have a
Yes.
house, that's a big commitment, obviously. But always
Yes.
be on the lookout for what your value is in the marketplace. Test it out. Go on interviews, even when you're not really looking. Just be
Yes.
out there and see what's out there. See what someone values you as.
And
So
even just within the company itself, because I know one
yeah,
of my
absolutely.
mentors advised that yeah, because with the 401k and all these retirement plans, because we in Northern California, we have a lot of unions. They are very strong. So
Yep.
their retirement packages are tied to how long you work for a company. So I always say, even within, I know one of our friends, Kato, Kato, he kept growing in his company, right? And even me
Hmm.
right now, I work for the same hospital since I moved, and I've seen that within, so you don't lose your gap for like, I want to work for the same place for the next 3 years or
Yeah.
7 years, but even within, you can change departments. Now
Yeah,
I'm in
absolutely.
outpatients, and I'm like, okay, this is so perfect for me. And it's still part of my hospital, but it's exactly where I was born to be. So not to hesitate to kind
Yeah.
of find those opportunities and mentors. So how did you find your mentors? Well, we are jumping because I wanted to find out more about how you paid for college, but
Hmm.
we'll go back to that later. But how did you find your mentors? Because how do you find mentors, especially if you're Ugandan and you're new here? And how do you do it? I know LinkedIn, somebody said LinkedIn, but what do I do? When I open an account, do I just email people? How do I find my
Hmm.
mentors at school?
Yeah. So there's
How do
different
I
kind of
do it?
mentors. I always say there's different
Mm.
kind of mentors. So I think you have to set your goals and what you're looking for in a mentor.
Natalie, go to
Uh,
your bed. I'm
that will help you
sorry.
determine. No, no problem. No problem. That will help you determine how you're gonna go about getting your mentor. If it's more professional, I always say
Mm-hmm.
if you have a good relationship with your boss, I think if your boss is a good advocate for you,
Mm-hmm.
then they should be able to link you and have connections and introductions if you tell them what you're looking for in a mentor. That's
Yes.
what I look to do to the folks that are underneath me. I try to link them up. I say, oh, this person wants to do sales. I know a couple of people I've worked in with sales. Introduce them, have an informal conversation, and it kind of starts like that. So it can be informal. The other way to do it is look for formal mentorship programs within your firm. I've been part of both.
Mhm.
I've done a formal internship program where we had to apply and they looked at us and they matched us up with certain people. A lot of
Wow.
firms have this, and it started. I would have meetings every other week with people,
Mm.
and we sit down and talk about what my goals are, and then we come in and assess. And hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
it's somebody who can challenge you a little bit and say, "Look,
Yes.
you're not doing this, so you need to kind of shift course or help you with idea generation." And it's two
Yes.
way. The mentor will bounce things off of you and is looking to understand what things are going on. With maybe younger folks within the firm or
Mm-hmm.
what's happening with you specifically. So I always advocate for it for sure,
So
and I try to do it as best as possible.
so you've had mentors in the workspace and
Yeah.
you have been a mentor. That's very
Yes.
important because most Ugandans we meet, like it's so funny because I was in Massachusetts and it's a bigger community than here. But then you have Ugandans who are professionals who say, I don't deal with the Ugandan community. So
Yeah.
they are very intentional to avoid the Ugandan community. And so we miss out on
Yeah.
mentoring other people so that
Right.
when they come, they don't fall in the same pit you fell in. If there's a
Yeah.
position in your place, pull them up, and show them how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're mentoring and you're being mentored as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's very important. And how about at school? Like if I'm from high school and I'm going to college or I'm trying to get into college, how do I navigate that whole mentorship thing?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different ways you can do that. If you're going into college, I'd say look for certain programs. There's certain
Mhm.
programs that cater to certain groups. Whether I mean, there could be, if you're African, there could be an
Natalie,
African
go to
student
your bed.
union. There could be an African student union. There could be a Black student union.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, or it could be a department, an engineering department. I'd say always know the folks that are working in the departments that you of the schools that you
Mm-hmm.
want to join if you want to do engineering.
Yes.
And I think those folks are pretty good at linking people up. Most every school
Yes.
when I joined and I went to UMass,
Mm.
people reached out to me. So like they reached out to me
Wow.
and said, we have these mentorship programs, and I was and I still am friends with my mentor on
Oh,
that I came
wow.
in freshman year, and that was within the engineering department. So
Nice.
I'd say students there's a lot of those type of programs when you get to
Mm.
campus, and it's usually covered when you that first summer when you're doing your intros or you're doing your your orientation. Act about
Mm-hmm.
mentorship, find out about mentors, try to get linked up with somebody, or ask your kids, have you asked about mentors? Are you linked up with a
Yes. If
mentor?
you're
Is
a
there
parent,
somebody who can
ask
help
your
you and guide
kids.
you? Ask your
Yes.
kids about that and also when you go on the school visits, because
Yes.
going to college
School
is a big one.
visits.
Yeah, yeah,
School,
yeah,
tell us about school visits because that's a big one. Like parents don't,
yeah.
I have to work, I have hours, I can't give up my hours. Like how important is school visits? What does that do to
Very
a
important.
child? And at what point
Oh,
do we do the school visits? Senior year, junior year,
I think it should
sophomore,
start
at what
junior year.
point?
I think it's
Junior
junior
year?
year. It's
Okay.
junior year. That's big when you're doing the visits. It should continue into senior year, but at some point in senior year, you should start to
You,
solidify and
you
know
made
where
up
you're
your
going at
mind.
some point. So it's
Mm,
really junior year. I think some people start that summer before they go into junior year. If you have breaks in junior year, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's just weekends during junior year. You're doing it. You set
Mm-hmm.
aside time and you say we're going to visit these schools. I think the visit is really important because it gives you a feel for the university. It's going to be a
Yes.
place where you're going to be spending a lot of time
Oh,
over
yes,
the
and
next
make a
4 years.
lifetime friends,
And I think honestly, personally, you develop more during college, I'd say, than probably you do during any other point in your life. And
That's
I just mean like straight point development. I mean, there's other things you go through, obviously parenthood, where you're growing a lot.
true. Mm-hmm.
But college, you literally, for me, it goes from being and living with your parents. It's the first time when you're really out on your own. You have to take
On your own, you
responsibility
find
for
yourself.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
I learned so many lessons. When I'll never forget when I was dropped off at college. My
Mm.
mother, she gave me the best advice in the world. She told me,
What did she
she
say?
said, she said, Basudde, you're gonna be in college, you're gonna be with other students, but don't forget, your best friend in the world, the guy that you're hanging out with, he's not going to call you in the morning to wake you up for class. So you have to do it. Just know, your best friend in the world is not gonna wake. You're gonna party, you're gonna hang out with people, you're gonna think you have friends. They're not gonna wake you up to go to class in the morning. They're just not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you have to do that. There's no you like
Self-driven.
and this is the beginning of your responsibility. You have to take
Yes.
responsibility
For
for everything that you
yourself, for
do.
your
Um,
life. Yes.
so that can be a lot to handle at first, and people react to that in different ways. So
Mm.
establishing mentorship, having a support group, surrounding yourself with people who are kind of like minded, have the similar goals. It's
Mm-hmm.
just so many things that are important.
I
But
know.
yeah, that transition is really tough,
It's
but
a
it's
harsh
important.
one. I mean, we are lucky. In Uganda, we most of our high schools. Oh, my child. That's my child.
It's okay
That's
if
my
you
child.
want to go
She's
get him, bring
busy.
him on the
No,
camera.
no,
It's all
no.
right.
Because she can. Let me bring her down until the interview. We're almost done with the interview. Just a minute.
Yeah, no worries.
We're going to say hi to Uncle Basudde real quick, and then you go play for a little bit, okay? All right, say hi.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi. How
All
are you?
right, Nathan, you stay here for a little bit. Now is almost done, okay? And then you go cuckoo, and then you go sleep, okay? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I was counting on
No
her
worries.
sleeping throughout this throughout this session. Not
Oh
a
yeah.
chance. Not a chance. So so a couple of things. So we have the part you mentioned, because we are trying to think as a parent. So sophomore year, do the visits, which means we have to sit down. First of all, decide what the child needs to decide what they are going to do, because different universities offer different.
Yeah, I'd say junior year. Junior year, I think, is where the
Junior year
visits
is a
happen.
big
But you
one.
should
So
start
that's
looking
summer.
at it sophomore to junior year. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So
Hmm.
junior year, we kind of say, what do you want to be? Because most kids, I have a cousin who was born and grew up in Denmark, and he moved here to New York for about 2 years and then moved back. But he said one of the things they used to have exchange students go, and they would ask them, so what are you going to become? Oh, I'm doing, what are you doing in like a profession? Because you're like a teacher or a lawyer or an engineer.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I'm doing a major in this, a minor in this. Like they can't clearly say I am in management or I'm
Yeah.
nursing or so it would confuse him. It's like you're wasting so much time and money doing a major and a minor in this, but you don't have a clear path. So from what you're saying,
Sophomore to
sophomore
junior year.
to
I think during
junior year.
junior year is where you're doing the visits. Junior year, you're doing most of the visits, but you're starting to think about the schools you'd be interested in sophomore going to the junior year,
Should
and the
we
ones
think
that you
about
would
the
be
schools with
applying.
what we want to do? What should we think about first?
Yes, the schools are
The
what's
schools
important. A
first?
lot of people
Okay.
don't know what they want to do going into freshman year, and that's okay. It's okay to go into freshman year and not know what you want to major in. That's fine. A lot of people do that. I
Yeah.
went into the school of engineering, but a lot of people don't know. I think you have a little leg up if you're in a school and you know you want to do something specific. And I know
Basudde, I'm
parents
so
will have
sorry.
opinions on that. Yeah, no problem.
I'll see you later. I'm so sorry. I really, really, I feel bad. But so you're saying most
Mm-mm.
people go into college not knowing what they are going to
I
do,
don't
and
know if
that's
it's most. I'd
okay.
probably say it's half and
So
half.
they
I
should
I,
choose
I
their
think it's
school
half and
before
half.
they choose what they are going to do.
Yes, I'd say so. If you don't know specifically absolutely what you
Mm-hmm.
want to do, if you know you want to, some
Mm-hmm.
people know. Some people know. Kids are different. Some people know, and so they'll, if you know you want to go into engineering, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
look for schools that are strong in that. If
Yeah.
you know you want to do business, you're going to look for schools and strong in that. But you should try to get
Mm-hmm.
into as strong a school as possible. Usually, if it's a
Yes.
good
So that
school,
school is
there's
important.
well-rounded school. Um, but if it's not, then
Let
you're
me
gonna go
finish
to a
my
school
meeting.
that's a little bit more well-rounded.
I'm so sorry.
No, no worries. If you want to come and sit and join us, bring her over here. It's okay.
Natalie, please. I need to finish my meeting. You need to take a nap. Okay, don't bother mommy for a minute, okay? I'm almost done. Um, we have a Cheerio book. Shh, Nene is saying.
Yeah, she's at that age.
So we have a Cheerio book, and now when you get the Cheerio book, you have to get the Cheerios. That's what's
Oh
happening
boy.
right here. I know. We have a Cheerio book, and the
Hmm.
Cheerio book will tell us how many bubbles are missing. So we feed in
Yeah.
how many.
Oh yeah.
For the love of books, we are very intentional about books, so
Oh
that
yeah. Books are good.
yeah, because I think like my sister Nakato is a lawyer by profession and she's a reader.
Hmm.
She loves to read for pleasure. I have had to learn how to study because it doesn't come
Yeah.
naturally. Mama, go to the
Yeah.
playroom. So we are very intentional about. Let me finish, Mama. I'm in a meeting. Let's play, Mommy. Let's play. Okay. So I'm so sorry about that. That's the life of
No,
a
no
toddler.
worries.
I need to
You
figure
know,
out this whole life.
No, 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 no. It's one of these things. We had this session in work, with everyone doing stay at home and people have kids and people understand, you have to have understanding for it. I brought, Nkwanzi in and I'm in a meeting. People know, like people have kids and you just have to understand that that's, when you have home life and you're at home and there's kids there, sometimes they're going to interrupt what you're doing. That's the way it
It's
works. So, hmm
this is a conversation we have to have you back, Basudde,
hmm
because I am crazy about policies. After being a mom, I think I'm going to be very intentional on finding out how I can advocate for my Congress, my senator, Congress, all my
yeah,
representatives to kind of advocate for women to have more time off and
yeah,
raise kids in
yeah,
this critical portion and not have the pressure to go back to work because the
yeah,
European
yeah,
countries are doing it and we
yeah,
should. It's a very short lapse of time and you go back and bounce back, but their lives it's invaluable. But that's
yeah.
a conversation for another day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
That's a very important thing.
yeah, for another day. We you were telling me something. I'm so sorry. We're talking about junior year. So choose a strong university. And
Yeah.
Basude, before I didn't understand um all this because for us you go to A level, right? And you study, like I did physics, chemistry, biology, and food science, and I knew that I wanted to do medicine, so I needed a biology and a chemistry, right? Like somebody
Mhm.
has already structured it for me, right?
Mhm.
So I'm knowing that I'm going to apply to Macquarie University and Bara University, and like everything is structured. But I found
Mhm.
out here that in college, the first 2 years you do general
Yeah.
everything.
It's
like
more
English,
general. Yeah, it
math.
is.
Yes. So
Mm.
when you say that it's okay for you to go in when you're not sure of where
Yeah.
you're going to be,
Hmm.
but once you're in, it's not okay for you to still be unsure. Like at some point, like by the
No,
end of the
no.
first
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
you
End of
need
first
to be
year.
sure because you're paying for this education. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
free anymore.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes. So I
By the
hear
end of
what you're
the first
saying.
year, you should
Choose
have
your
declared a
school.
major. Yeah, yeah. But you want to be at a strong school because you want to know that there's going to be options. So, I mean, you want to know within some degree. I mean, is it going to be, am I going to be more towards the science? And you'll know by how you're doing in school what you like
Yes.
more. Do you like more English, lit, or is it going to be more science or math related?
Mm-hmm.
Are you into the arts? Is that more where you want to be? So you kind of have to establish that a little bit. You have to know,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know have to know exactly what your major is. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
start to have those meetings, and the schools for those who aren't undecided are pretty proactive about it. You get assigned a mentor, and they're having
Oh,
meetings,
yes.
and you're like, "Did you like this, or is this something you feel like you can do?" And you're having conversations. Most schools, if you're undecided, are gonna have a guidance counselor, and you're gonna have to have those conversations about what you should do. And then, yeah, by the
Right.
end of the first year of college, you should know. You should
You
have
should
declared. You
know.
should know what your
Mm.
major is by that point. I went into the School of Engineering, so I was straight in
You
when
already
I knew.
knew.
So yeah, no, I knew I wanted to be in engineering, and
Yeah.
I guess I had to figure out what kind of engineering. But
That
I had an
part.
uncle who did
Yes.
electrical engineering, and so I
Mhm.
said, "Let me do that," and I just stuck with it.
Mm.
So
Again,
uh,
mentorship. You had an uncle, mentorship. So I think
mhm,
my mom is amazing. My mom is very intentional about introducing us to people because I remember we had we were she found out about campaigning. We were campaigning for a certain candidate, and she's like, "Oh, you have to be a part of this because everybody here is a professional, and this and that." And so I ended up being so involved, and my mom even stepped away and she didn't volunteer as much, but she introduced me
mhm,
to a bunch of people. So as a parent, I think you also have to kind of seek other parents out, like parents
mhm,
who have kids in high school or who have kids in college, so that you can ask and ask the questions, or even at the schools themselves, like the high schools do have a student. I think that's called student counselors, so you can actually set up an appointment with your child and kind
yeah,
of ask those questions that the child like do your research so that you know what to ask
sure.
when you go in here, right? Okay. So
Mhm.
visiting the schools, choosing a school eventually, and then cost. Should we think about cost? So we, being a school, first we said schools that have options like a 4-year college as opposed to two, if you can, a
Yeah.
public school as opposed to a private school, and then you
Mhm,
mentioned your grades, like because we never think about looking. Like it's funny, in Uganda we used to look at people's homework, our children's homework, our children's reports. Here we don't ask for a
mhm,
report because they give every quarter, end of month, like every month, end of month, they give a report. Like they have
mhm,
4 quarters and they give you every quarter of that semester. But I don't think many parents look at those. Because
mm,
if your child brings home a bad quarter, then you have a chance to catch it by the second quarter, by the third quarter, by the fourth quarter, you've caught up on that GPA. But
yeah.
I don't think parents are thinking about all this. And the only reason why I know this is because I have a little sister in law who is like 17 now. And I've seen, I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Like for me,
My
I'm like,
parents were
you're in high
very
school.
serious about looking at our report cards. They would look at our report
Mm-hmm.
cards, but also I had
Mm-hmm.
extended family who were looking at report cards. Even my granddad would ask to know at our report cards or what's going on there. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, there was a sense that, like, if I knew I was doing bad in something, I knew I should turn around because I knew people were going to be looking at my report card. So that I knew. So, I mean, there's not, and it's going to be scrutinized. So, I mean, and that can add pressure, but at some point,
It's good
you have to
pressure.
understand what pressure is, right? You have to
Good
understand, and you have to be
pressure.
able to live up to that, right? So there's a good amount of pressure that you can apply. And that's part of parenting, right? You've got to apply
Thank
some
you.
pressure, right? A little bit of pressure. So it can be unhealthy. Some people get to an unhealthy point, but if you're
Mm-hmm.
balancing it out right, there should be a healthy amount of pressure you can apply. So your child
Yeah.
is excelling and hitting the marks that they want to.
and
So
and
yeah,
and because at first I talked about expectations. I think kids, if you expect this of them, because I remember my mom would ask, are you studying hard? I would say, oh, I'm trying. It's like, why are you trying? When I go to work, I don't try, I work. So I knew that like a little pressure. And of course, when you'd fail and get discouraged, like, no, don't you worry, she's a very religious person, God is going to intervene and you won't even know what hit you. Like she knew exactly at what point where she shouldn't be hounding down, but encouraging. And then at what point where she was like because are so playful and personalities. Like I said, I have a
Mm-hmm.
sister, Nakato. She's a scholar by nature. She would
Mm-hmm.
sit down. She was number one throughout her law school.
Mm-hmm.
She by nature throughout high school, elementary school, number one all the time.
Mm-hmm.
My
Mm-hmm.
brother David, same. Some people are naturally skilled. Then you have us. Me who has
Mm-hmm.
to someone has to constantly. It doesn't mean I can't grasp. I just need that.
Yeah,
um
and
and it's
children are different.
okay.
They need different things. They need different things.
Hmm.
Some kids are just different. So yeah, what one child you have to do, maybe push a little bit more, maybe the other one you don't. I mean that happens. I mean it's just
Yeah.
children are different, but expectations, I will say, and this level of pressure creates a level of perception in your mind that you are going to achieve something, believe it or not. I mean, it
Yes.
starts to, and that's the
Yes.
most important thing. If you can't see yourself doing something and believing that you can do it, then you won't get there. So, I mean,
Yes.
setting those early kind of seeds, planting those seeds in the mind of the children early,
Yes.
they start to see that, oh, yes, I'm supposed to go to college. I feel like
Yes.
I will excel. I feel like I'm going to do well. And then you get there. You get there
Yes.
somehow. So it's important to create those
Uh-huh.
impressions. If you have negative reinforcement and negative, then can go the other way too. So
Yes.
it's
It's a
I think it's
balance.
all in creating that atmosphere that says, look, this is the expectation, this is the standard,
Yeah.
and eventually they get there. So yeah.
So now that you're a parent and you grew up in America and Rose grew up in Uganda,
Hmm.
did you guys talk about how you're going to parent? And do you feel like you're on the same page?
Hmm.
Because my husband moved here when he was young, so but then he grew up in Uganda, and so
Hmm.
but I'm so grateful because our values in terms of parenting, disciplining, we talked about all these things before we had children, and God was so good because he was intentional. We wanted a child for like 2 years, and God just said, wait, you're not ready.
Hmm.
And it gave us time to talk about these things, how we wanted to get it done. And of course, when they come, the kids, it's different.
Hmm.
It's different. So now that you're a parent with
Hmm.
Rose, and you've grown up in these two spaces, how do you feel about that? How does Rose feel about that?
Yeah. I think honestly, me and Rose. I mean, I think the beauty of the relationship, which is good, and it's an important foundation of every relationship, is I think we communicate very well.
Yes.
Where we might have differences on certain things, we talk things out. We come to
Hmm.
an agreement of how you're going to do things, and that's, I think, very important when you're parenting. I mean, and Kwanzi's so young now that we're
Yeah.
learning a little bit along the way, but as he gets a little bit older, it's going to be important to develop and be on the same page about things and have a
Yes.
united front when you're dealing with certain things, because kids, they pick up things and they're
Yes.
quick. But I think that's just belief in building a strong relationship.
Yes.
But we have similar goals and definitely values, as far as
Mm-hmm.
we're both very religious people. I think we're both
Yes.
try to instill a lot in education. Rose has also excelled a lot when she was in school.
Yeah.
So we have those kinds of values and what we would want to instill. We definitely will challenge our kids and want them to do well. I think that's all going to be there. I think we have
Mm.
different strengths, for sure. I think
Which is
uh,
important
yeah,
because then
no,
it
definitely.
balances out.
Absolutely. I think Rose is a
Yeah.
much better communicator than I am. I
Yeah.
think I've improved. I've come a long way,
I
as
know
you
that's
have to
part
when you're
of
developing along. Yeah,
growing. Yeah.
I'm telling you, you
Like
have to
marriage
grow
is
and
another college of its
it
own.
is. It's a whole thing, and you
It's a
just
whole
develop this along the
thing. It's
way.
a whole
Um,
thing.
yeah, but I think there will be, I can see I'll probably be a little bit more, sterner in some regard. I think
Mm.
I think I'm more willing to have hard conversations. Like that's just
Yeah.
how I was raised and how I am in
Mm.
general. I'm not afraid to
Yeah.
have hard conversations if I need to.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So I think that's there. But I think we complement each other well. I think that's important in parenting,
Do
for
you
sure.
do you know how to speak Luganda?
I'm not fluent, no,
But you
but
understand the language.
yeah, I understand a lot. I understand a
I
lot
think
enough
you
that
do.
you
Yeah.
won't be able to necessarily, talk about me behind my back. So you won't
I
be
know.
able to backbite me,
I'm
in
asking
most
that
instances.
because will you teach Kwanzi that language? Are you planning to do that?
I
I
know
feel so
roses,
bad.
that's for sure. I
I
know
won't.
roses.
I'm like, I am
It's
the biggest
tough.
Pan Africans there is, and my kids don't speak Luganda. Like they understand, and I'm trying, but it's sad that I'm like, okay, my kids, I don't want them to just understand. I want them to speak. But then you don't realize that that's a whole like task in itself. And it's like, okay,
It
I'm
is.
going
It
to do
is.
it.
It becomes tough, especially here in America. And I think I grew up with me and my sister grew up with a lot with those questions. And I think once you see, and we've had a lot of generation here that's here now raising
Yes.
children. Now you can see like how it is. It's
Yes.
it's not easy. And
It's not.
some could it's interesting. It gets harder as you grow up. I think when you're younger, when the
Yes.
kids are there, you can
Mm-hmm.
start to develop some a little bit, but it's hard because
Language.
it's the day to day. It's every day, and then they'll and then when you get into school, it becomes even harder, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
then they're going to school, and to be honest, they're coordinating with their friends,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes harder. I think the way
Harder.
that you can go about it is
Mm-hmm.
obviously at home when you're there you can start to set up lessons. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is I always tell people that English is such a dominant language that it requires so much and it's so different, so if you're learning in
Mm-hmm.
English it becomes a challenge to now go in other languages
Yes.
because it's the way you're thinking in English first, which is a language that's structured so differently than other languages, right?
Yes.
So that's where it
Yes.
becomes pretty difficult.
Pretty
But
difficult.
honestly,
And
I always tell people it's do the best you can always, have those lessons, set up time. I always, lament. What was thing that interesting when I lived in Cincinnati, they had, a little bit of a smaller
mhm.
community, which I think it made it easier to do this, but they had like a school
Mm.
that were going up and
With
people were
Luganda
volunteering.
and kids learning
Yep.
the
Ugandans were
language.
there and they would have
Nice.
Luganda class and they tried that a lot here in Boston when I was younger too. I don't know how much it took.
Yeah.
It's so hard because people are volunteering
It's
their time.
hard.
It's
It's
just
hard.
time,
I
you know.
know in Boston there's a friend of mine, Juliet. She does
Mhm.
Africano. She's trying to kind of make like that integration and have kids exposed to that culture, the
Yeah, that's the best
Ugandan
way to
culture.
do it.
Because yeah, because the
Yeah.
Ugandan culture is not just like Buganda, right? There's all these
Mhm.
other ethnicities.
Yeah.
So she has a couple of volunteers, and if you're out there and I know Baganda represented Anisha is really doing an amazing job. But if you want to volunteer, Ruchiga,
Yeah.
Lunyankole,
Yeah.
Teso, you sign up with Juliet. She's amazing, and she did
Mhm.
run an Africano when she lived in German as well. So I like it when like people migrate, but then also continue to kind of have that vision. I want to have a piece of Africa wherever I live, and to make sure that our children, it doesn't make them any less American. It just makes them aware of where they come from. And,
Mhm.
these values must be carried on, through our culture. So,
Yeah.
oh my God, Basudde, we could go on and on. I just feel like there's so much I still want to ask, but I have to host you another day.
Please do
Two,
whenever. I'm
two, two,
happy to
two
do this.
questions. When
Mhm.
was the first time you went to Uganda?
I was 5 years old. So it
You
was
were
actually
five?
sometime I was 5, my sister was 2.
Uh-huh.
So I was 5 years old, yep. So my
Did,
parents took us.
uh-huh.
I remember a bit about the trip because I think I was old enough. I was 5. I don't
Yeah.
know if my how much my sister was. She was really young,
Remembers. Uh-huh.
2, but yeah, we went. It was an experience. I remember, parts about going on the plane,
Mm-hmm.
meeting my grandparents there, and my
Oh
grandparents,
my
or at least
goodness.
my grandfather had been here and seen us before, but
Yeah.
that was the first time I was there, and the experience was definitely interesting, for
Would
sure.
you live? Would you live in Uganda? Would you choose to raise your family in Uganda, or for you as a couple, you decided to live here?
There would be. I'll put it this way: I don't see myself living in Uganda as
Mm-hmm.
it currently stands, but it's not about Uganda in general. It's more about
Mm-hmm.
like opportunity. I very much value my career. I like challenging myself. If I could find something similar to that in Uganda, and I really thought I could, then fine. And of course, I have connections. I think I could get a job in Uganda if I wanted to. That's
Yeah.
decent. I would consider it, and the thing that would make me really consider it is what's happening in America with cost of living, cost of
Yeah.
education, the cost.
Yeah.
But the thing that would scare me about it is, healthcare. The health that
Healthcare.
would worry me. That would worry
That's
me,
a big one.
honestly.
Yeah.
That would worry
That's a
me.
big one. It's funny you. Mm.
Yeah.
It's funny you talk about career because my brother Elijah went to school in England and then he went to Uganda for 7 months and he did aero engineer. No, he did aero administration. So he kind of understands planes and economies and
Yeah.
money in terms, But he was very frustrated. So because there was no space to grow. There was no space to grow, and the structure was already set, and there was no space to evolve that structure. So you
Mm-hmm.
either kind of fall suit and kind of keep carrying things the way they are, or you leave, So he chose to leave. So I think that would be one frustration. But
Mm-hmm.
as a couple, that's something I think people need to think about. Like if I choose to get married, did you always want to get married to somebody who was Ugandan, or you were just open?
No, I was pretty open. I think it was always gonna. I think it developed that way. It didn't have to. I
Mm,
dated other girls. Like I dated a woman who was from Zimbabwe for a while, and I thought we
yeah,
that was getting pretty serious. I've dated other women from different cultures,
yeah,
but the way it kind of happened, well, with me and Rose is because as I mentioned earlier, I'm very into family.
yeah,
I found out that I'm not as trustful of other people who are outside of my family. I trust my family a lot, but
yeah,
I'm not very trustful when it comes to other people. It's
yeah.
crazy. I've tried to be better about it, but like
Hmm.
honestly, so through my connections, honestly, it was my cousin who gave me Rose's number, and that's how the
Imagine.
relationship started to develop. So
But
like
that's how
through
they
that
used to
way,
do it. Mm.
yes, through that way, I could see how it was going to happen that way. But
Yes,
otherwise, honestly, I was pretty open. So, I mean, I've always been a person who thought I could date people that it's much more
for
about the
who they
woman and
are.
her makeup and, how we coordinate and how we gel. So,
Yeah. And I think
yeah,
that's a big challenge. And I think I asked that because it's a big challenge for young people. Like personally, when I moved, I was very intentional about I wanted to end up with someone who had my culture, like who was
yeah,
Ugandan, who was in
yeah,
Uganda. And that sounds very backward. But for me, I think because I know how I anticipated how tough marriage would be. Like
yeah.
marriage, merging two people. Like I have siblings and we've grown up, same DNA pool that we were picked out of, same upbringing, and yet we don't connect on certain things. So
Mhm.
I said I didn't want culture to be another thing. So God
Yeah,
is
it's
amazing
true.
because yeah, because Jack, he chose me. Like I was like, how you dismiss someone, you're like, yeah, you're my friend's cousin,
Mhm.
but then turns out he comes from a big family, I come from a big family, like all those values that we talk about, they kind of aligned. So but what you're saying is young people should be open, just be open.
I
There's
think
a
you should be
whole
open,
world out there.
especially when you're young.
Yeah,
Especially when you're young, I think as a parent, you have to watch out for, if there's destructive relationships, because that can happen
yeah,
if you're not careful. But for the
mm,
most part, when you're young, you should be young. I feel. When it gets to the
yeah,
point where things are obviously getting more serious, and obviously here you have to have talks with younger people about things like sex and what to do and things
yes,
like that, because
yes,
that happens here, and you're gonna have to be up on it.
mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I think people should be young. Young people should be young. I tell people, sometimes people get lucky and you find that, but more often than not, especially once you get to a certain age and you're really looking, if you close yourself off, it might be harder because you're not opening yourself to the full pool of people who are there and available for you. And
Yes,
I tell people that, I have a lot of friends who are like you, say, I definitely want to date. And I definitely understand that everything you said is true. Like it makes it
yeah,
easier. Even with me with Rose, I mean, our families have an understanding. We
yeah,
understand what culture. I don't have to explain, these rituals about a wedding or what's happening with, dating
yes,
or even certain customs
yes,
about how you interact with one another, right? There are certain
yes,
things that
yes,
other cultures they wouldn't understand that come up so often.
yes.
Me and
Mm-hmm.
Rose laugh about these things all the time, but
I know.
it,
And it's so funny because like when you grow up in Uganda, you don't even realize because like this is the way things are done until you come to America and then you realize that, oh, there's actually a difference because
yeah,
other
oh
people
yeah.
do things differently. I did one of my mentors, my teacher, Madame Obi, she always used to haunt me. Beatrice, a friend of mine, Rita and I would always study together, so we'd always work together at uni, and she's like, are you dating somebody yet? Are you dating somebody yet? Because she always felt like uni, which is college here, is like a good place to find a lifetime partner if you're lucky. So
Hmm.
take like so and I mentioned this because it's 4 years of you growing up, right? So don't take the relationships you build, even if they're just friends. You might not date them while they're in college, but down the road, you might meet each other again because of that relationships, that the seed that you planted and you cultivated that relationship. So college is more than just that, education and the career that you're building. It's
Yeah.
also the relationships that we're
Oh,
building.
absolutely. It's definitely a
Mm-hmm.
it's social growth as well. It's knowing how to
Social
manage those
growth.
relationships and do it. I will say this,
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I've noticed about,
Mm-hmm.
college and looking at it, and I didn't date as much. I dated a lot. I dated in college, but
Mm.
not as much as I did like after college, for sure. I
After.
started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this, women seem to deal with it better than men. I think they have more
Yeah.
emotional maturity. They
Yes.
mature more faster emotionally, right? So they're able to handle
Mhm.
that dynamic because you have to prioritize school. Like with men,
Yes.
it becomes a
Full
thing. If you're too into
priority.
women, you could fall off your radar. Your grades could suffer, and it's more apt in men. So you have to be mindful of that, I think.
Shush it
Hmm.
away. Mm.
Mm.
She says she sees an ant, and I asked her to shush the ant away. No, you're very right. No, and I think that's a conversation too to have, like, prioritize. I remember my mom asked 20, and I said, "Mommy, everybody at uni is dating except me." And she's like,
Mm.
"You have the rest of your life to do that." Of course, for her, she was always afraid of, like, of just deciding to fall out of school and follow a man, right? She
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
us to
yeah,
really
yeah,
focus
and
on
that is a concern
studies.
with
So
women for sure. Yep.
yeah,
Hmm.
so I think that's a conversation parents really need to have with their kids, and then to just, like, have that talk before they go to college, because so much is going to happen in terms of relationships, in terms of them starting to be sexually active. So you have to have these conversations. And African parents, it's like, in Uganda, your auntie has that conversation with you. Even your parent doesn't, right? My parents were,
Hmm.
they just had that conversation anyways. But most times your auntie or your uncle, if you're a boy, like, has your father's brother and your father's sister, they have that
Hmm.
conversation with you. But I think as a parent in America, you might not have that luxury of the extended family,
Yeah,
and you
it's
have to have
tough,
that conversation.
and for me personally, I think it was tougher for my parents to have those conversations with us. I don't think either of them, that's really in their. I think my mom is a little bit better. She tried to have these conversations, but my mom is such a direct person
Yeah.
that sometimes it would turn into like she'd just come out and straight ask things of me, and I would just be like, "This is
I
crazy."
can't.
She was a
This is
little bit
inappropriate, ma'am.
too
I can't talk to you
intrusive,
about
and my
this.
father was the exact opposite way. My father would be the most awkward thing when he would have these conversations, and it would just be awkward because
Yeah.
neither one of us are the
Yes.
most conversational people at times,
Mhm.
so
Mhm. Mhm.
in that way it would always get awkward, but it's important to kind of have those conversations, but also not to be too alarmist. Yeah, I mean, your mother was half right. At some point, you are young. It's not the end of the
Mhm.
world if you're not like dating every week
Dating.
or something like that.
Mhm.
It's fine.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's more important to be social. Are you developing friendships that are healthy? Are you in
Yes.
social groups? Are you
Yes.
developing or meeting people that are the right kind of people that you would want to meet, because even at
Yes.
that age, the people you surround yourself and the people you hang out with, your
Mhm.
friends, they have such an
Mhm.
influence on you. So you have to be wary of it. Um,
Very.
but they build your
I have,
relationships, honestly.
Basudde, I know we've been.
Hmm.
Yeah. I have one last question. I said that
Yeah,
10 minutes ago about
no,
SATs, and we're jumping from our social lives to academics. Tell me about SATs,
sure.
like that
SAT.
exam.
Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
standardized test. It's
Mm-hmm.
honestly it's important. It's hugely important in the college process. I
Mm.
think there's been some changes, and I have to read about. I've read
I
some
know because of
articles
the
that
pandemic,
school
they've been.
exactly. Yeah, well, the pandemic is one thing, but also in general, how the SAT is viewed. When I was growing
Yes,
up and I had to get
it
into
was
college,
important.
SAT was imperative. You had to study it. I remember taking practice classes. I think I even did courses
When did you do
on the
that? Is it
side,
in your
like
senior
after
year?
school. There was an after school program at my school that had like was like SAT prep, and I don't remember.
When?
I feel like
In senior year or
no, no,
junior
no,
year?
no, no. You take SATs, I think in soft and junior year, but I want to say this was like sophomore year. I think this happened in
Mm,
sophomore year. We were doing the practice, and I
okay.
want to say it was like an after school thing. And I would go after school, and there was computers, and we would just do
Mm-hmm.
these practice sessions. And a lot of it was just like vocabulary was really important. Math, I was
Mm-hmm.
very good at the math portions, but the
I know.
vocab part and
Mm.
that stuff really tripped me up. So I
You
had
had
to
to
go and really practice a lot,
put in
sentence
the work.
construction and all that. But the thing
Mm-hmm.
to know about the SAT is it's not I mean, it's scholastic aptitude test, but it's not really testing your aptitude, honestly. It's testing how well you can take that test. So you just have to know, and that's part of it, right? And to me,
Uh-huh.
honestly, it's not a measure of how smart you are or
Yeah.
anything in that nature. It's just a measure of how much you studied to take
Mm-hmm.
this test and how much, because it can be practiced. The more you do it, you're gonna get better at it. It's one of
Yeah.
those things you do practice tests. It's a very important thing to focus on. But I have been reading articles that schools are starting to de-emphasize it a little bit because it's culturally biased. The test is culturally biased, and I mean, there's no question about it. There are
I
things that
mean,
they talk about on the
the
test that,
conversation
yep, go ahead.
the conversation has started, but it's still a requirement in some of these
Yeah,
competitive spaces.
yeah,
So my advice is, if you're in sophomore, yeah, if you're a parent who has a child in sophomore, yes, look for where the classes are, like Basude said, after school,
mhm,
because these kids are done with school by 2:30, right?
yeah,
So if they go for a class between 3 and 3:30 for an
mhm,
hour, you're not giving them more. It's
yeah.
something. And I feel like for us, we would go to school from 8 a.m. Well, you have prep. Like there's a high school, we're lucky, we would have prep in the morning, 6 a.m. to 6:40. But in Deji, like 5:30 in the morning, you're up studying till 7:30, and then you have class the whole day till 5 p.m., right? So
Mhm.
by the time you go to uni, it's not a shock of how much you need to be learning. But here
Yeah.
you have school between 8:30 and 2:30, and then you go to college, and it's a shock of how much is required
Well,
of you.
I will say this: it is a shock. Well, I mean, I think the college thing is just responsibility. But I will say this: as you
Mm-hmm.
get older, I'd say junior
Mm-hmm.
high to high school, that is a thing. But I was doing something after school all the time. Extracurriculars are very important. So from junior high to high school, as soon as you're old enough, I was always doing something after school. So I would be in
That's
school till
important.
4 or 5, anyways. Whether it would be sports or whether it was I was in the math team, I was doing
Mm-hmm.
student government. I was doing that
Mm-hmm.
for a while. I was always
Mm-hmm.
doing something after school. So,
And
um,
was it you signing yourself up, or was it your parents like encouraging you, like, oh, is there this? I saw this, or it's a
I
little
think
bit of
some of it
both?
was my parents, but I'll say
Mm-hmm.
this. I think some of it was my parents in some regards, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it was more me. I don't think my parents knew everything that was on offer there. So I think it was more
Yes.
professors and counselors who I was dealing with and said, I think you might do this. Or I would see things, and friends that I would be with in some of these advanced classes would
Mm-hmm.
be doing it. So I would say, yeah, let me do that too. I did National
Yes.
Honor Society. That was a big one because we did a lot of volunteer stuff
Nice.
in that. So I was like from I'd say junior high school, seventh, eighth grade. I was always doing something after school.
Doing
I would say,
something after school program. Yeah. So,
yeah,
it's not good. It's not good if we just say let them go home and watch TV or stay on the phone, because then
no, yeah,
then
yeah,
then later you require them to do more with their
yeah,
day.
no,
Then
no.
you're not doing it's a disservice to the children
No, definitely. I'd say seventh, eighth grade, they should be looking into what they can start doing after school
at
because
school.
it's also a part of the college process. They look for what you're doing on extracurriculars, and that's a differentiator. You're gonna get to a point where grades are good, and but you're gonna get to a point where a lot of people have good grades. Like you're gonna get to that
Yes.
level of competition. So, like, what are you
Yes.
doing? Are you volunteering? Do you have what are your extracurriculars? Are you in government? Are
Mhm.
you doing? It becomes very important.
Very important that
So,
you're doing these things. And I guess it goes back, we need to know the system, so that we, because you can't, like, next year fall you start college, but you have to have prepared 3 years from next year. You know what I mean? For everything, like
yeah.
this year you're submitting your personal statement, and it's talking about everything you've done the past 3 years. So if you didn't think about it and be intentional, you end up, mama, I'm in a meeting, come here. So you end up like falling behind the bar and not being competitive, right?
Hmm.
So, oh my God,
No, you
Basudde,
got to be
I have
well
to invite
rounded.
you.
You got to
Yes,
be
you have to
well
be well
rounded.
rounded.
So, I mean, not everybody's involved in the arts. I did singing, I did chorus all throughout school, and I
Nice.
played an instrument. I
Yes,
used
you
to play
did
clarinet.
guitar, right?
I
Even
play guitar. Now
after.
I picked up
We
guitar
never
later.
came
I
to.
actually didn't pick up guitar till college, actually,
I never
and I
came
taught
to
myself.
any of your concerts. Now that I think about it, I'm like, what? What?
Mm, mm.
What? Do you
Yeah, I play
still
guitar.
play?
I
Now that
do,
you are
but you know
dad, do
what?
you
It's
still?
been tougher. It's tougher to find the time,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna get more into it now because Nkwanzi loves music. So, I'm
Nice.
sure he will very much like it, if I'm playing guitar, and that might, obviously if he's, moody, it can calm him down. So,
I know.
I'm gonna get back into it for sure. I used to love it,
Get back into
but
it. Oh my
between
goodness.
working, I was doing CFA and obviously the baby. It's been so hard to find
Baby
time.
is a big responsibility.
Yeah, a lot of
Well,
it's
thank you
time.
so much. I have to
Hmm.
invite you again. Thank you so much
Please
for
do.
being on our
Yeah.
channel. We've been here for long, and I've been trying to keep it at 1 hour, but
Hmm.
we'll wrap it up. Is there anything final that you want to kind of share with our audience?
I would say, I think the point about mentorship is important, but
Mm,
I think I'll wrap it up by saying, don't put limitations on yourself.
yes.
I'll say more than anything, you know, your kid is gonna grow up. They're gonna, if you're Ugandan and you moved here and you're raising kids here, and it's gonna be different than what you experienced.
Mm,
Embrace that a little bit. Um, I'd say the most important thing is know what your kids are into. Talk to your kids, know who they are.
mm,
You have to come at both sides. You have to be a disciplinarian. They have to know you're serious, but you have to also come from the other side. They have to know
yeah.
that you're friends and you guys can talk. You're not at the
Yeah.
same level, but that you want them to be able to tell you things,
You're
because
still
that's
a
important.
parent, you're not a friend, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we want to
Hmm.
be friends as opposed to a parent,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
parent is a loving person. Like,
Hmm.
love is part of it. Like, just
Yeah.
because you're structured and you're strict doesn't make you any less
Yeah.
loving.
Hmm. And
Yeah,
I
they
say
have
be
enough.
yourself, reach out,
Hmm.
talk to people. You're not alone. Reach
Hmm.
out, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help if you need help.
Yeah.
Go ahead and find somebody. There's great people who are willing to help, like Beatrice,
Yes.
obviously.
Uh-huh.
And
And I'm going to send them your way. Basudde, is it okay if I
do
send
it.
them your way if they're interested
Yeah,
in engineering or
yeah,
management?
yeah, for sure.
Or
Yeah.
stock market, because I know part
Oh
of
yeah.
what you do is stock
Yep.
market
Sure.
and and, and, and
Absolutely.
and I mean, so one of these days we are going to shift the gears into like financial planning, and that's
Absolutely.
and definitely I will invite you when we kind of shift gears to that financial planning,
Absolutely.
because that's part of what where we fall short, because we talked about the 529s, five
Yeah.
for the kids, and stock market and 401ks, and that's one of the things I actually want to talk to your dad, to invite your daddy on that show, retiring, being in
Mm-hmm.
that space. How do we prepare, because these conversations are important for people now, like us
Mm-hmm.
who migrated when we are adults already, or you first gen Natalie, who is born here, right?
Right.
Because
I'd
my
say it's the
sister-in-law
most
was telling
important
me,
part to build generational wealth, to build that generational
yes,
wealth and the ones that you want to transition to your children. Retirement and planning for it is the most important thing. So it's
yes,
what people don't realize. You get caught up working all these hours and you want to give your kid every advantage, but even more than spending that little extra to send them to a private school or do this and that is planning for your own retirement. Because what's going to happen
yes.
is if you are don't plan for it properly, you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
there and you're going to be a burden to them eventually because you're not going to
Yes,
be able to work at some point. And then if
yes,
you haven't planned for your retirement, they're going to have to take care of you. And then
of
it
you.
becomes a cyclical issue where it's going to become an issue. So planning for retirement is very
It's
important.
a big
Yeah.
deal. It's a big deal, and I think the political climate right now in Uganda and all over the world, not just Uganda, I mean, tells us so much more, because so many people migrate thinking that, what, after 10 years, after 20 years, when I turn 65, I will return home. But what if that's not a possibility, right?
Hmm.
And you really have to have you really have had to establish yourself in this system, then what, right?
Hmm.
So that's something that definitely later on the show, because this month of October we want to focus on career and education, but ahead we want to talk about money,
Yeah,
because
I'd love to talk about it for sure.
yeah, because we work more and not parent, and we don't want to
Yeah.
have our kids, visiting our kids in jail.
Yeah.
We So those decisions, like how do we strategize the choice to move out of a state into another, to study in another state as opposed to the state you're in, all these things, we want to talk about money one of these days.
Yeah. We don't talk about money enough,
We don't talk about
as
money enough.
people enough, and we should. So I'm open
We
to it
should.
for sure.
And
Hmm.
Abasude, and one of the things, my mom taught us how to work hard. My mom she's an amazing, she lived by example, worked her whole life so we could have that, like, best education.
Hmm.
And but then one thing she never taught us is how to save. So she taught us how to work hard, to be generous, to give all, because that's what she's done. So we've
Hmm.
seen the kids watch, and I met my husband, who is like, he's a math guy, numbers. He will ask you, how much was this milk? And I'm like, I don't know. I bought so many things. How much? I've never thought about the
Hmm.
price of milk, right?
Hmm.
But you should think about the price of milk because you buy it every week,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
so now him, he grew up in a saving culture where everybody saves their money. I grew up in a spending culture. We work extremely hard and spend extremely big, right?
Hmm.
So now in my 30s, I'm learning that I need to go into the saving culture because that's what America requires of you
It does.
in all this money talk. So we definitely have to have another day to talk
Yeah,
about it.
absolutely. It's a big topic, and I'm definitely available and open to do it for sure.
Thank you, Basudde. I
Yeah.
really, really appreciate this time. Thank you,
No.
everybody who joined or who'll be watching this show after we've aired it. And if you have any questions, put the comments down below. We are AfriCent. Share this video, AfriCent with BT. Ask your questions. If you need mentorship, we have a very big Ugandan community in Massachusetts, and so there are young people out there, like Basude, and they're willing to mentor you beyond nursing. I'll talk to you about nursing because I'm very passionate about nursing, but there are people elsewhere doing other, careers, and they're thriving. They're not
Hmm.
surviving and struggling. They're thriving at what they're doing. And we're going to, keep hosting these people so that we open up your mind to them and open up your mind to all your possibilities. So thank you for being here. I'm so excited. May God watch over you today,
Thank you,
yesterday,
Vivi.
today, and forever. Thank you so much, Basud. I really
Take
appreciate
care.
you.
God
All right,
bless.
take care. God bless.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Mhm.
All right.